The hallways of the Galactic Academy buzzed with excitement on the first day of the new term. Floating orbs of light illuminated the crystal corridors as students from 100 different worlds made their way to their classrooms. Some floated, others crawled, and a few even rolled. But today, everyone's attention was on the two-legged figure walking confidently through the main entrance. "Is that a human?" whispered Rock, his crystalline form reflecting the morning light. The silicon-based student's fragments trembled slightly as the newcomer passed by. "I heard they accepted a Deathworlder this year." Blue bubbled through her water-filled environmental suit. Her tentacles twisted nervously as she observed the human's sturdy frame. Tom Reed tried to ignore the whispers as he checked his schedule tablet. He was used to being the center of attention. It came with being the only human in most places beyond Earth. His simple academy uniform looked plain compared to the environmental suits and protective shells his classmates wore, but he didn't mind. Growing up on Earth had taught him that appearances meant little. The classroom fell silent as Tom entered. Professor First, a gaseous being contained within an elegant floating sphere, paused in mid-lecture. "Ah, our new student has arrived. Please, introduce yourself to the class." Tom stepped forward, his boots making solid sounds against the floor, sounds that made several students flinch. He smiled, trying to appear as non-threatening as possible. "Hello, I'm Tom Reed from Earth. Looking forward to studying with you all." "Earth?" squeaked a small, fuzzy creature from the back. "The Deathworld with active tectonics. The same planet with liquid water covering most of its surface." Another student asked, their bioluminescent spots flashing with anxiety. Professor First bobbed in what seemed to be approval. "Indeed, the Academy has long wished to include perspectives from Class 13 planetary environments. Tom's acceptance marks a historic moment for our institution." Tom took his seat, specially reinforced to handle his Earth-normal weight, while his classmates maintained a careful distance. He could hear them whispering about Earth's gravity, its extreme weather, and its dangerous wildlife. If only they knew that he considered his homeworld quite pleasant. During the lecture on interstellar physics, Tom noticed his classmates sneaking glances at him whenever Professor First mentioned forces or pressures. He caught Rock staring particularly hard when the topic turned to gravitational effects. "Question," Rock's crystalline voice chimed. "How does the human endure such crushing gravity daily? Earth's pull is 3 times stronger than standard." Professor First's gaseous form swirled thoughtfully. Perhaps our new student would like to share his perspective. Tom cleared his throat. "Well, we're just built for it, I guess. Earth's gravity helped shape our evolution. It's actually comfortable for us." "Comfortable?" Blue's water rippled with surprise. "But your bones, they must be incredibly dense." "They are," Tom answered. "But that's normal for us, just like how your water environment is normal for you, Blue." The class murmured in amazement. Professor First used this moment to transition into a discussion about environmental adaptation, but Tom could tell his classmates were more interested in him than the lecture. As the class ended, Tom gathered his things, noticing how even this simple action drew attention. His classmates watched in fascination as he easily lifted his bag, which would have been crushingly heavy on their homeworlds. "Tom." It was Rock, approaching cautiously with Blue floating nearby. "We usually gather in the zero-gravity lounge after class. Would you join us?" Tom smiled. "I'd like that." He had expected fear or isolation, but curiosity seemed to be winning over caution. As they headed to the lounge, more classmates joined their group, each keeping a careful distance but burning with questions. Tom knew what was coming. They all wanted to hear about life on Earth. He grinned to himself, thinking about how their reactions to his simple daily routines would probably be more entertaining than any dramatic stories he could tell. "So," Blue asked as they entered the lounge, her voice bubbling with curiosity, "what's it like, living on a planet that's constantly trying to kill you?" Tom laughed. "Well, that's quite a story." The zero-gravity lounge of the Galactic Academy floated with curious students, all eyes fixed on Tom. He sat comfortably in a reinforced chair while his classmates drifted around him, their environmental suits glinting in the soft light. "So on Earth," Tom began, "we have these things called hurricanes. Imagine winds strong enough to lift buildings." Blue's water swirled frantically in her suit. "Winds that move buildings. Impossible." "Not only possible," Tom smiled, "but I lived through one of the biggest ones 2 years ago." He closed his eyes, remembering that day. The memory was crystal clear. Dark clouds turning the sky black at noon, palm trees bending like rubber, and the endless howl of 200-mile-per-hour winds. Tom had been helping at his coastal town's emergency center when Hurricane Max hit. "We knew the storm was coming," Tom explained. "Earth's weather satellites track these storms. My whole town worked together to prepare. We boarded up windows, stored food, and helped elderly neighbors move to safer places." "You mean you stayed?" Rock's crystalline form shimmered with disbelief. "Didn't your government evacuate everyone?" "Some people left," Tom nodded, "but emergency teams had to stay. I volunteered with the rescue group. Someone had to help those who couldn't leave." Drift, a gaseous student, floated closer. "But why risk your life? Surely machines could handle such tasks." Tom leaned forward, his eyes serious. "Machines break. In conditions that harsh, you need human judgment and adaptability. Plus, it's about community. We help each other. It's what humans do." He described how the storm hit at night. The wind screamed like a living thing, throwing cars around like toys. Rain fell so hard it felt like needles on skin. The emergency center's reinforced walls groaned under the assault. "The worst part came when the eye wall hit," Tom continued. "That's where the strongest winds are. We could hear buildings being torn apart. Then we got the call. A family was trapped in their home as floodwaters rose." The alien students huddled closer, their various environmental systems humming with tension. Our rescue team took the amphibious vehicle. The streets had turned into rivers. Debris flew everywhere. Trees, roofs, even a small boat passed over our heads. But we kept going. "How could you even see in such conditions?" asked Blue, her tentacles twisting anxiously. "Night vision goggles and determination," Tom answered. "We found the family in their attic. The water had reached the second floor of their house. Getting them out." He shook his head. "Let's just say I'm glad humans are good swimmers." "You entered the water." Rock almost cracked in shock. "During a storm." "Had to. The family had a young kid and an elderly grandmother. They couldn't swim well enough in those conditions. I made 4 trips through the flood to get them all to our vehicle." The lounge had grown silent. Even Professor First, who had drifted in during the story, floated motionless. "The real heroes were the meteorologists," Tom added humbly. "They tracked the storm, predicted its path, gave us time to prepare. Without them, many more would have died." "Died?" Drift's gaseous form swirled in distress. "You mean this happens often enough to have deaths?" "We get several big storms each year. That's why we prepare, train, and work together. It's just part of life on Earth." Professor First finally spoke, their sphere pulsing softly. "Fascinating. Your species treats lethal climate phenomena as routine occurrences." Tom shrugged. "Earth throws a lot at us. Hurricanes, earthquakes, volcanoes. They're all just challenges to overcome. Actually, that hurricane wasn't even my toughest experience. There's worse." Blue's water nearly boiled with excitement. "Ever heard of mountain climbing?" Tom grinned as his classmates leaned in eagerly. "Now that's a story." The alien students exchanged glances, realizing that their fragile human classmate might be tougher than they had imagined. And as the artificial day cycle of the academy continued, they settled in to hear more tales from their fascinating Deathworld colleague. The next day, in Extreme Environment Studies class, Professor First projected a hologram of various planetary landscapes. The gaseous teacher's containment sphere sparkled as they displayed an ice-covered mountain. "Today, we discuss survival in high-altitude environments," Professor First announced. Most species avoid such conditions due to low oxygen, freezing temperatures, and— "Excuse me, Professor." Tom raised his hand, trying not to smile at the massive mountain floating above them. "That's Mount Everest, isn't it?" "Indeed. Earth's highest peak. A completely uninhabitable zone that. I climbed it last summer." The classroom erupted in chaos. Rock nearly shattered in shock. Blue's water suit bubbled furiously. Drift condensed into a tight ball of gas. "You willingly ascended that death trap?" Rock's crystal voice cracked with disbelief. Tom nodded. "Humans climb mountains for fun. We call it a sport." Professor First's sphere dimmed slightly. "Perhaps, Tom, you could share your experience. It seems I may need to update my lecture notes." Tom stood up, walking to the hologram. "Everest is about 29,000 feet high. The air at the top has only 1/3 of the oxygen we have at sea level. Temperatures drop to -60 degrees Fahrenheit. And yes, humans climb it for entertainment. But why?" Blue's tentacles waved in confusion. "Because it's there." Tom grinned. "But my story isn't about Everest. It's about what happened in the Himalayas during a training climb. That's when things got really interesting." A hologram shifted to show a steep, snowy slope. Tom pointed at the white expanse. "I was with 3 other climbers, practicing for Everest. We were at about 20,000 feet when we heard it. The sound of thunder, except it wasn't thunder." His classmates leaned forward, environmental suits humming with tension. "Avalanche," Tom said quietly. "Thousands of tons of snow and ice rushing down the mountain at over 80 miles per hour. We had less than a minute to react." "Surely that meant certain death." Drift swirled anxiously. "For most species, yes. But humans?" Tom's eyes gleamed. "We train for this. First rule: run sideways, not down. The avalanche is faster than any human. Second rule: grab something sturdy. Third rule: create an air pocket before the snow buries you." The class stared in horror as Tom described diving behind a rock outcropping, pushing his face into the crook of his arm to create a breathing space as the wall of snow hit. "The pressure was intense," he continued, "like being squeezed from all sides. The snow packed in hard as concrete. But I had my air pocket, and I knew my teammates would be searching. Humans have developed tools just for finding people in avalanches." "How long were you buried?" Professor First asked, their sphere pulsing with scientific curiosity. 2 hours, in -20-degree snow, but we wear special gear for warmth. The real challenge was staying calm and managing my oxygen. When I'd finally heard my friends digging, Tom smiled at the memory. "Well, that's why we never climb alone." Rock raised a crystalline appendage. "You mean humans regularly venture into conditions that could kill them, for recreation?" "Mountain climbing teaches us about ourselves," Tom explained. "About our limits, our courage, our ability to work together. Plus, the view from the top." He gestured at the hologram. "There's nothing like standing above the clouds, seeing the curve of the earth." Professor First's sphere brightened. "Fascinating. It seems humans have turned survival itself into an art form." "More like a science," Tom corrected. "Every dangerous situation teaches us something new. Take forest fires, for example." "Forest fires?" Blue interrupted, her water trembling. "You mean you deal with uncontrolled combustion too?" Tom checked the time. "That's another story. Maybe during lunch break." As the class ended, his classmates crowded around his desk, all thoughts of keeping the safe distance forgotten in their eagerness to hear more. Even Professor First lingered, their teaching protocols clearly being rewritten by these revelations about human capabilities. Rock whispered to Blue, "Perhaps we should reclassify Earth. It's not just a death world. It's a training ground for the galaxy's toughest species." The Academy's lunch hall buzzed with excitement. Students clustered around Tom's reinforced table, their various environmental suits and containment fields creating a colorful display. Even those who usually avoided the dangerous Deathworlder now pressed close, eager to hear about forest fires. "In Australia," Tom began, picking up his food tray. We don't just have fires. We have fire seasons, entire months where the land can burst into flames. Spontaneous combustion. Drift condensed nervously. Your planet randomly ignites. Tom took a bite of his synthetic protein bar. Sometimes it's lightning strikes. Sometimes it's the heat. Temperatures can reach 120 degrees Fahrenheit. The trees there have actually evolved to need fire to spread their seeds. Blue's water suit rippled with shock. Life forms that require destruction to reproduce. Truly, Earth is insane. Last year's fire season was particularly rough, Tom continued. I was volunteering with the Rural Fire Service when we got the call. A fire front was heading straight for a small town. The flames were over 100 feet high. Rock's crystalline form vibrated. Surely you evacuated. The town did evacuate, but the firefighters. We went toward the fire. Professor First, who had drifted into the lunch hall during the story, interjected. You deliberately approached an advancing plasma reaction. Someone had to stop it. Tom pulled out his tablet, showing them pictures. His classmates recoiled at the wall of orange flames, the black smoke turning day into night. These fires can move faster than some vehicles. They create their own weather systems, fire tornadoes, lightning, even rain. And humans fight this. Blue's tentacles curled in disbelief. With everything we've got. Water bombers. Aircraft that drop thousands of gallons of water. Fire breaks. Gaps cut in the forest to stop the fire's spread. And on the ground, firefighters in special suits that can withstand extreme heat. Tom described how they worked through the night. The heat was so intense it melted road signs. The roar of the fire drowned out their radio communications. Ember attacks, burning debris carried by the wind, started new fires behind their lines. The worst part wasn't the fire, Tom said, his voice growing serious. It was the smoke. Even with our breathing apparatus, the air was toxic. But we had to protect the town's water treatment plant. Without it, the whole region would lose clean water. His classmates listened in stunned silence as he described how they used controlled burns, fighting fire with fire, to save the facility. You deliberately started no fires. Rock's crystal structure nearly cracked in shock. Sometimes that's the best defense. Burn the fuel before the main fire arrives. It's about understanding how fire behaves, using it against itself. Did everyone survive? Blue asked quietly. Tom nodded. We saved the plant. Lost some buildings on the outskirts, but no lives. That's what matters. Drift expanded thoughtfully. It seems humans have mastered every hostile element. Water in hurricanes, ice in avalanches, fire in these infernos. Not mastered, Tom corrected. We've learned to respect them. Earth's taught us that you can't control nature. You can only prepare, adapt, and work together. Professor First's sphere glowed brightly. This explains much about human physiological adaptations. Your species developed in an environment that regularly experiences every known form of natural disaster. Speaking of disasters, Rock chimed in. You mentioned something about the ocean yesterday. Tom grinned. Ever heard of deep-sea diving? Humans like to explore the darkest parts of our oceans, places where the pressure could crush most spacecraft. The lunch bell chimed, but nobody moved. Even Professor First remained, their usual punctuality forgotten in the face of these incredible tales. The ocean story will have to wait, Tom said, standing up. We have xenobiology next, and I heard we're studying extreme pressure environments. His classmates hurried after him, their previous fear of the human completely forgotten. As they walked to class, several students were overheard making plans to study Earth's survival techniques, just in case they ever needed them. Although, Blue whispered to Rock, I'm starting to think humans don't survive Earth. Earth survives them. The xenobiology classroom's holodisplay showed a cross-section of Earth's oceans. Professor Second, a floating collection of bioluminescent dots, pointed to the deepest layer. The Hadal Zone. They flickered, represents the most extreme pressure environment on Earth. No complex life forms can. Actually, Professor, Tom interrupted politely, humans visit that depth regularly. The professor's lights scattered in surprise, then reformed. Impossible. The pressure at that depth would crush most spacecraft. Would you like to hear about my research dive last summer? Tom asked. The professor's lights pulsed in agreement, and the class turned to listen. We were studying deep-sea vents off Japan's coast, Tom began. Our submersible took us down to 35,000 feet. That's about 1,000 times the pressure at Earth's surface. Blue's water suit bubbled with excitement. But how did you survive? Special vessels called deep submergence vehicles, or DSVs. Though sometimes we use special suits for direct observation. You exit your vessels. Rock's crystalline form trembled. In those conditions, Tom nodded. The suits are amazing, like wearing a small spacecraft. But what we find down there makes it worth the risk. Creatures that live without sunlight, using chemical energy instead. Some can survive in water hot enough to melt lead. He described descending through the darkness, watching the water pressure gauge climb. The vessel's lights illuminated strange creatures that had never seen sunlight. Then they reached the sea floor. That's when things got interesting. Tom continued. We found a new hydrothermal vent, but our main thruster malfunctioned. We were stuck at the bottom of the ocean. His classmates drifted closer, environmental suits humming with tension. The backup thrusters weren't strong enough to fight the current. Our options were wait for rescue, which could take days, or try something risky. What did you do? Drift swirled anxiously. I suited up. Someone had to go out and fix the thruster. Tom's voice remained calm, but his classmates' various environmental systems whirred in panic. The pressure at that depth, Professor Second flickered rapidly. It would implode most vessels instantly. That's why we triple-check our equipment, Tom explained. The real challenge was working in near-total darkness, with limited mobility in the suit. One wrong move, and he shrugged. He described exiting the submersible. The complete darkness, broken only by his helmet lights. The strange sensation of being surrounded by water pushing with unimaginable force. Using tools while wearing gloves thick enough to withstand pressure that could crush a car into the size of a soda can. The repair took 2 hours, Tom said. But that wasn't the scariest part. As I worked, something huge moved in the darkness beyond our lights. Blue's tentacles curled tight, a predator. We never saw it clearly. Could have been a giant squid. They'd live at those depths. Some are bigger than our submersible. You share your planet with such creatures? Rock asked incredulously. We've only explored about 5% of Earth's oceans, Tom smiled. Who knows what else is down there? Professor Second's lights formed a question mark. Your species ventures into such unknown conditions, voluntarily. Humans are curious, Tom explained. The more dangerous or unknown something is, the more we want to study it. Actually, that's not even the deepest dive I've done. There's deeper. Drift condensed in shock. Ever heard of the Challenger Deep? It's the deepest known point on Earth, almost 36,000 feet down. Now that was an interesting expedition. The class bell chimed, but Professor Second quickly dimmed it. Their lights formed words in the air. Class extended for educational purposes. Rock whispered to Blue. I'm beginning to think Earth isn't a death world at all. It's a training simulator for the galaxy's most adventurous species. No, Blue replied, watching Tom gesture enthusiastically about another deep-sea adventure. It's both. And somehow, humans have learned to thrive there. Professor Second's lights twinkled thoughtfully. Perhaps it was time to update the Academy's Earth Studies curriculum. Clearly, there was much more to learn about this death world and its remarkable inhabitants. The engineering laboratory of the Galactic Academy hummed with activity as students worked on their structural stability projects. Professor Third, a being of pure energy contained within a crystal matrix, watched as teams built model buildings using holographic materials. Tom was helping Rock test a design when the professor approached their station. Interesting support system, Professor Third noted, examining their work. But it seems quite rigid. How would it handle seismic activity? It wouldn't, Tom said honestly. On Earth, we learned the hard way that buildings need to move with earthquakes, not fight them. The professor's energy patterns shifted with interest. You've experienced planetary crust displacement. Experienced it. Tom laughed. I lived through the big shake of 2043. That's actually why I got interested in engineering. The entire lab fell silent. Even the holographic projectors seemed to dim as students gathered around. Tell us, Blue urged, her water suit rippling with anticipation. Tom set down his tools. I was in Tokyo when it hit, 8.9 on the Richter scale. That means the ground moved so much it cracked buildings like eggs. Your planet's crust just breaks itself. Drift expanded in horror. Regularly, Tom nodded. Earth's surface is made of massive plates that float on liquid rock. Sometimes they crash into each other. When they do, he mimed an explosion with his hands. But how does anyone survive? Rock asked, his crystalline form vibrating with concern. Preparation and engineering, Tom explained. Japanese buildings are designed to sway with the shaking. Some can move several feet in any direction without breaking. But that earthquake was bigger than anything we planned for. He described how it felt. First, the deep rumble, like distant thunder. Then the ground rolling like ocean waves. Buildings swayed back and forth, windows shattering, roads cracking open. I was on the 42nd floor of a skyscraper, Tom continued. The whole building was moving nearly 6 feet side to side. We could hear the steel frame groaning. His classmates' environmental suits whirred with tension as he described helping evacuate the building, using the emergency stairs because the elevators were too dangerous. The worst part came after we got out, Tom said. The quake had damaged a major dam upstream. We had less than an hour before the flood hit the city. Surely then you fled. Professor Third's energy patterns whirled anxiously. Some did, but others of us joined the emergency teams. We had to warn people, help the elderly evacuate, set up barriers. Humans are good at coming together in a crisis. He told them about working through the night, how they used boats to rescue people trapped by the flood, how citizens formed human chains to pass supplies across broken streets, how engineers worked in dangerous conditions to prevent a nuclear power plant from melting down. The earthquake lasted 3 minutes, Tom said, but we spent weeks dealing with the aftermath, rebuilding, helping survivors, strengthening our buildings for next time. Next time. Blue's tentacles curled in shock. You mean this happens more than once? Tokyo gets hundreds of small quakes every year. Most you barely notice, but big ones. They're not a matter of if, but when. That's why we prepare. Professor Third's energy form brightened with understanding. So your species doesn't just survive disasters. You anticipate them, plan for them, use them to improve your technology. Exactly, Tom smiled. Every disaster teaches us something new. Makes us better, stronger, more prepared. Rock's crystalline voice chimed thoughtfully. It seems humans don't see Earth as a death world at all. No, Tom agreed. We see it as home. A challenging home that keeps us on our toes, but home nonetheless. Actually, that reminds me of the time. The lab's end signal chimed, but Professor Third quickly overrode it. Continue, please. I believe we're all learning something far more valuable than standard engineering today. The students settled in, their fear of the human long forgotten, replaced by admiration and curiosity. Even Professor Third's energy patterns showed excitement as Tom began another tale of Earth's challenges and human perseverance. Perhaps, Blue whispered to Rock, we should be calling Earth a life world instead of a death world. After all, it created humans. The Academy's main auditorium was packed for the annual Homeworld Symposium. Students from across the galaxy presented their native environments, but everyone was waiting for one presentation in particular. When Tom stepped onto the stage, the excitement was palpable. Today, he began, standing confidently before the giant holoscreen. I'm not going to talk about Earth's disasters. Instead, I want to show you something else, ordinary life on my Deathworld. The first image appeared, children playing in snow, throwing white balls at each other. We let our young play in frozen water crystals, Tom explained, smiling at the gasps from the audience. Blue raised a tentacle. But the cold, the risk of freezing. We call it having fun, Tom replied. Like this next activity. The image changed to show people swimming in the ocean. Rock's crystalline form shimmered with disbelief. You willingly immerse in your planet's liquid water. For recreation. That's nothing. Tom clicked to the next image. A parkour runner leaping between buildings. Some humans do this for sport. Professor First's gaseous form swirled, deliberately risking falls from height. More images followed. Skydivers falling through clouds, people rock climbing without safety gear, surfers riding giant waves, runners in desert marathons. But these are just our hobbies, Tom continued. Let me show you daily life. The next series of images showed construction workers on tall buildings, firefighters entering burning structures, miners deep underground, farmers working fields during storms. Every day, millions of humans work in conditions you'd consider lethal, not because we have to, but because we've learned to thrive in them. He showed more slides. Scientists collecting volcano samples, doctors fighting diseases, astronauts repairing space stations, deep-sea welders fixing underwater pipes. We built our civilization in defiance of what nature threw at us. Every challenge made us stronger, more innovative, more determined. The final image showed Earth from space, a blue marble swirled with white clouds. You call Earth a death world. Tom's voice grew passionate. We call it the cradle of humanity. Every threat it presented helped shape us. Hurricanes taught us to predict weather patterns. Earthquakes taught us to build better. Deep oceans challenged us to explore further. Forest fires taught us to respect nature's power. He gestured to his classmates in the audience. Over these past weeks, you've heard my survival stories. But for humans, survival isn't enough. We want to understand, to explore, to push boundaries. That's why we're here among the stars. Professor First floated forward. In light of Mr. Reed's experiences, the Academy Board has decided to make several changes. Earth Studies will become a mandatory course. Additionally, we're establishing a human survival techniques program. Excited murmurs filled the auditorium. But Tom added with a grin, that's not the biggest news. He clicked to one final slide showing a construction plan. The Academy has approved Earth's proposal to build a death zone training facility. The image showed training areas simulating Earth's various environments. Hurricane chambers, artificial mountains, underwater pressure tanks, and more. Any species that wants to learn how to handle extreme conditions will have the chance, Tom explained. Under safe, controlled conditions, of course. Rock's voice rang out from the audience. Will you be one of the instructors? Actually, Tom smiled. I'll be the first student, because even after everything I've survived, Earth still has more to teach me. The auditorium erupted in applause, some clicking crystals, others waving tentacles, some pulsing with light. As the celebration continued, Blue moved next to Tom. You know, she bubbled thoughtfully, maybe we've been looking at this all wrong. Earth isn't a death world that humans somehow survive. No, Tom agreed, watching his classmates excitedly discuss the new training facility. Earth is a teacher and humanity. Well, we're just eager students. The Academy's artificial day cycle began to dim, simulating sunset. But inside the auditorium, the excitement continued to grow. After all, they weren't just celebrating Tom's presentation. They were celebrating a new understanding between species. And somewhere on that distant death world called Earth, new challenges were forming, waiting to teach new lessons to humanity's next generation of survivors, explorers, and dreamers.